Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today is a really great, and special LinkedIn Live event for me. I have my executive coach on here, Amy Balog with Connection Point, and she's the CEO and founder of Connection Point, but amazing person, and we're going to ah, deep dive into listening and some other things that she really is a fantastic resource on. So help me welcome Amy to the stage.
Hello, Paula.
Hello, Amy. How are you?
I'm really good.
Yeah.
I'm really good. Yeah, so good to see you, my beautiful Paula
Oh,
White.
it's a Monday, isn't it? It's a Monday. So I was telling everyone, what a special and dearing friend you are. First
Mhm.
starting out as my executive coach and really pointing me in directions that I never thought I could go. And now one of my dearest and best friends. So
Oh,
thank you for being on this show with me. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before I
okay.
talk more and more and more?
Other than I have this fantastic client, Paula White, that's done an amazing thing. Um, yeah, you're probably one of my coolest client stories.
That's awesome. I
um,
know you have a
okay, just I mean, my big thing is if you go out to see Amy Balog at LinkedIn, you'll read all about me, but essentially very short version, 20 some years in corporate, uh, similar to you, couldn't fight the leadership bug, love the work, love the craft, and made a business out of it in 2008 in that recession. So it just goes to show, right? You can reinvent your life at any time. And so I run a coaching business, and it really is another tagline could be coach to the new vice president, because I have my roster is typically people who have already had a lot of career behind them,
Mhm.
seen a lot of rodeos, but they are still yet hitting another uh, pitch of their career. It's big, and when you get into a place where you're really doing some scale at leadership and line leadership, as you already know, I mean, that's a very powerful time to revisit your leadership craft. And I'm very fortunate just to have been doing this for 15 years, year 15 for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the business is great.
Sometimes we,
Love them
as leaders,
dearly. And it's a good amount of right about peace over performance almost.
all right. So I think you're getting a little bit
When
stuck.
they go to my LinkedIn, that's a hashtag I keep. So they can check that all out.
So Amy, you were getting a little stuck there for a moment, but I want to make sure that I get out there that you talk a
Uh-oh, we're having internet delays.
peace over performance, hashtag peace over performance. I think that's amazing that you work with, VP leaders and above and helping them go through a lot of, you know, I know sometimes we hit a brick wall of where does our career go from here,
Mhm.
right? And I think one of the lessons and one of the things that you really talk about that I find so fascinating that I wrote about it in the book, which you
Mhm.
are in the book, is active listening. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your perception and your what you do with active listening because you are the guru, the expert.
Oh, boy, I tell you, I hope so. Um, it's always a work in progress, right? Even if you teach stuff, you really got to remember that you got to live it. So it's always every day. What's interesting? So a number of years ago, I had a very special client, and it was one of the coolest engagements I've had. And it was not a coaching engagement. I was asked for a major hospital system to build a train the trainer experience for their leaders for listening.
Mm.
And I was just honored to do it. I had been doing keynotes on listening, and the keynote they heard me do was a keynote about listening as a state of presence and not a skill, but just that you become a familiar with the listener that is in you. And that's a whole different ball game, and it's a whole different way of looking at what listening is. And they were intrigued by it, and one of their really talented PhD, leadership development experts came up to me and said, "We really like to teach this." So it was a great experience, and I really had a lot of growth in myself going through that process of building that out.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to uh, when it comes to listening. And the interesting thing, I'll jump around a little bit. They ended up changing the name of the course to Leadership Presence, which I think is really cool
Oh, yeah.
because what happens is when you really get as intentional about listening, and it's funny because what we discovered is you can go really far. We took people from all levels of leadership, people who were leading in hospital, like right on the floor, leading right on the floor, to people in the management, administrative
Hmm.
offices at senior levels. And it was really fascinating because when you listen at really deep levels in a way where you are putting your whole person into it, there's so much more you can do with it than you realize. And what I love about your book, and the reason why you and I connected all the way through your coaching engagement, and then it showed up in the book, is even your character Henry.
Well,
Okay, listen. Okay, wait, listen. Everybody's got to buy Paula's book, Side B, because remix your leadership. Yeah, here, wait. No, I'm going to do this right because
oh,
here we go.
well, now we
Okay, okay,
we planned on, but thank you.
okay. Now, come on. So you got to get her book, and you got to read about Henry all the way up, and definitely into chapter 4 and page 97, because it's a really rich moment that I think you had an example where Henry is a senior executive and he's being told by one of his directs
Yes.
that one of their people in their downline is not cutting it. And, it wasn't somebody that was ever in that situation before. They were just making these assumptions. And Henry takes it upon himself. I'm giving away part of this chapter to really investigate and by way of listening. And you have the top of the section, sometimes you just need to listen. And, what it is, there's the thing we did in the course that ties to what you're talking about in your book, is that listening is it's an intentional act. And what I did is I designed a listening model for my client that gave 3 levels of listening based on where you want clarity. And then once you know where you want clarity, you know what kind of questions you're going to ask. And what I love about your book is the character. And of course, you have the bass guitarist, which is one of your personas that I am. And, that's all about listening. So it's kind of cool how all these dots connect.
Hmm.
You illustrated that in those pages on chapter 4 beautifully. You illustrated Henry going into I'll tell you what the listening levels are in a minute, but you illustrated Henry going into a present state of meaningful listener, is what I
Wow.
would say.
Thank you. I mean,
Yeah, you did good.
honored to, because to me, Henry is a vast, uh, Henry is a CEO that is so busy that really comes together into finding his own leadership style through many different challenges that come upon him. But um, I think one of the most important ones is this act of listening. So
Hmm.
let's talk about your 3 levels of listening.
Sure. Okay. So there's listening. What way there's so there's multiple listening models out there, by the way, right? Even like Stephen Covey has a 5 level model. There's so many different models. And I appreciate what they all bring. I wanted to bring a model that aligned this type of listening you were doing, the type of clarity you were going after, and the type of questions you would ask. So, because the material that we developed was taking people through the levels of listening and then taking people through, practicing the different kinds of questions. And each of these levels actually have a relationship. So I'll illustrate that in a minute. So the first is informational listening. The informational listener, which is where you're getting clarity, is simply the clarity is current state and information. That's it. I need directions, or I need to know how you need to get something done at this moment, or it's what we do 1,000 million times every day. It's clarity against informational listening. And we're going to probably ask some closed questions, some closed-ended questions, some specific questions, but we're really just after information.
And that's
Really.
what most people are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say, across the board, most people, especially in business and sales and marketing, is all in informational gathering.
And there's nothing wrong with it. Sometimes we need to be great informational listeners. Like, and even that can be a struggle. You're distracted with your phone or something else that's on your mind. You're not even doing that. So that's just to enter point informational listening. So then there's, okay, this is interesting, empathetic listener. Now, I just listened to a podcast on empathy. It's very interesting. The expert on empathy is, it's not necessarily, empathy as research isn't necessarily designed around feeling it as much as the willingness to have understanding,
Right.
of yourself and the other person. That's a very interesting piece of research. But the clarity that you want as an empathetic listener is you want clarity on the person's feelings and needs in the moment. That's very different, right? So think about the kind of conversation you have with someone is, I want to walk into this moment as an empathetic listener. You think about Henry's story in your book. I mean, they were telling him a story about this guy in his organization, and he started engaging in it. He could have just been an informational listener and taken what their information was face value and done nothing more, right?
Right.
But he made a decision. So now empathetic listener means is something you're doing right there in the moment. So right now, if I'm like having time with you, I'm going to ask some different questions, and they're going to be a little bit more open and thoughtful just to hear about what you're feeling and what you need. And maybe also I will share what I feel and need, which is what my dear friend Nate Regier would call going open, which is so powerful.
Wow.
But that's how I describe, very simply, ridiculously simple. Because, the interesting thing about teaching this at a hospital is they don't have time.
Yeah.
I mean, things are moving fast. And one of the interesting things we learn through this process is you don't have to have a ton of time to suddenly drop into empathetic listening. And you don't actually have to have a lot of your own emotional engagement, because some people are very emotionally engaged in conversations and some people just aren't.
Right.
So you can still do empathetic listening. And then the last one, and the coolest one, which is at a higher level, but it's meaningful listener. And meaningful listener is really cool because what it's going after is clarity on what's the unfolding story.
I remember you and I talking about this, and it's such a beautiful state of being in that listening. Tell us more.
So meaningful listener, when you're a meaningful listener, I'm not only thinking about the information you're giving me. I'm not only thinking about what you might be feeling and needing right now, but as I am building a relationship with you, which we all have to do in a workplace, and I am thinking about the journey you have been on in entirety until we're sitting, like, what have you been through before? What is going on with your life current state journey? Where's your future state journey? So it's completely meaningful listener stuff is completely journey story based.
Wow.
And so you're listening to hear. And so you think about executive coaching, and you and I know this because now you're also a coach, is, this is a big part of what coaches do is we don't just listen to help people hear themselves. To help, we do that, but to get people to do that, we have to listen to their story and the
Right.
stories they tell. And so Henry, in your book, goes into empathetic listener in the moment where people are trying to tell him, yeah, just don't worry about this guy. He's just not cutting it anymore, to pulling him in an office with his leader, which I loved. That was the way you did that story. And he gets into his story and he becomes a meaningful listener. And so meaningful listener questions are expansive and they dig a little deeper. So you can see that you're not going to just come right into maybe an initial thing and go right into it necessarily. But if you're aware that you can think about any relationship you have, and some with a cool exercise we did with this is, I had them rate where they felt they had influence and didn't have influence, and what levels of listening were continuously engaged. And when you want to build influence in times, you got to go into meaningful listener, and how to do it. So that's really the three levels.
That is awesome. I mean, because what I see and what I'm hearing is they each expand upon each other.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened in the Henry story. So, maybe I transformed you.
Well, I'll give you permission to put the model in your next book. So
Next
we
time.
could have a feature because that is really, with the questions kind of correlate along with it. And I think it's really important because, I talk about peace over performance, and listening is a mechanism for peace. And I'm
Yeah.
not talking about, just making peace with the other person, but just having a presence of peace. When you start listening, it just changes the entire energy of the entire moment. And so just to know how to pick out, like, where am I going? So in coaching and in leadership work, and I don't want to go too much longer on this, but I would just say this really short is sometimes you'll see people as coaches where and we all can do this, where we walk into situations as an informational listener. It doesn't start out bad, but it isn't going well because we need to be something else. We
Right.
need to be empathetic listener, meaningful listener, and we need to maybe open up even more conversations and come at them differently. And I think it's just great to be able to have a way to gauge where you're at.
And I think that just transitions us to our next topic. And
Mm-hmm.
it, we talk about it coming at it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a text from you that said, "We have to listen to this song."
That's right.
Against the Wind by Bob Seger.
Yeah.
See, what hit you? Well, I'm going to read a lyric here.
Okay, go ahead.
And then I want you to tell me, because
Okay.
you know my lyric for leaders.
Right.
I'm
It's
very
awesome.
passionate about lyrics. And for years rolled, and the years rolled slowly past, and I found myself alone, surrounded by strangers I thought were my friends. I found myself further and further from my home.
Mm. Okay, so one of the things that is important about being able to step into a listener is you have to be able to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And you put this in Henry's story in the chapters beforehand, is he's starting to realize this disassociation with who he's being and what's happening at work. And if you're not able to listen to yourself and hear your own story and understand why, suddenly something's bothering you and what's going on, and listening to your body and listening to your sense of levels of stress and all these other things, and you're missing something. So it's really important. The reason why I sent you that text is you're doing something really beautiful that I think a lot of people should pay attention to, because what Paul is doing is what you're doing is you're going on to live. You're doing these recorded videos, and you're pulling out lyrics, and you're reading the lyrics back with a really powerful reflection. And you have a YouTube channel that you're putting a library together.
Yep.
So I've been following that, and I think it's great. And what's interesting output of that for me personally was, now when I'm listening, I like to go on walks with my headphones, and I'll be on a walk, and now I know I'm suddenly now starting to pay attention to the lyrics,
Yeah.
right? Like more so than normal. because of the way you're helping us like take the lyrics out and make meaning out of this, right?
Right.
So what you've introduced, which is very powerful, is a method, a medium of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And reflection, I have found in my 15 years of coaching, it's not necessarily an easy exercise for many of us. Some of us do not like to think about ourselves. Some of us aren't used to sitting still. Some of us like to think about ourselves and everything we're doing and not ask ourselves big, hard, amazing questions. So we need multiple mediums for reflection. And music, and not all my clients are fans of trying to journal or
Right.
having even the time. But what this music medium does is it takes a lyric and it lets you think about something about your situation to become more self-informed. And so that song, that Against the Wind,
Yeah.
I was walking, and I'm thinking I have a lot of similar situations with clients in all these industries where they feel like the world's against them. They can't get the advocates that they want in their companies. There's no slowdown happening.
Yep.
Their people are burned out. And essentially, the push I have as a coach is, hey, man, I've got to help you see this, but that you have a lot more runway to become your own advocate. I'm not saying not to engage and find advocates, but you can do a lot more than you think you can in terms of advocating for yourself. But you know what it feels like? They're against the wind. They're against the wind, and they have no friends. And it's empathetic, and it can be, when you are a people leader, it can just be you can have bouts of feeling very isolated,
Very
even
low.
though you're very busy.
Right. And that's what I love about even the last part of it.
Hmm.
All those drifter days are past me now. I've got so much more to think about. Deadlines and commitments, what to leave in, what to leave out.
Right.
The wind, I'm still running against the wind.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
I mean, and you think about that and take that into a leadership perspective, and it will be on my next series of for leaders because I love when people challenge me to find a lyric. So anyone out there, text me or LinkedIn me anything you want and have me challenge me to find a lyric and how it relates to leadership. But I found this as we run so fast and fast and fast, and all of a sudden it says I was living to run and running to live.
Right.
Song really goes down through what leaders do. You've got
Yes.
so much, so much, so much until you find yourself alone, and you're looking at all I have are this data, these deadlines, these commitments. Where
Where am I?
where am I?
And you experience this work with me, and you are giving now paying it forward to others. It is scary and counterintuitive to put a full stop on that for a bit and say, not necessarily quit your job, but say, hey, wait, I'm not going to just take time. I'm not going to work myself to the end of myself and just take vacation to be completely exhausted and have to recover. I'm going to take moments to invest in myself by listening to myself, which we need mediums to do that. We need
Yeah,
a way to reflect and break it down. And that's what we both help our clients do, is break things down so you can hear what you're saying and then come back into the fray, but come back in differently. We don't have to be a victim of it, even
right.
though it seems overwhelming sometimes.
Well,
So
and that's what I found so beautiful with you is I was able to journal, reflect, put presentations together for what I needed, outline things. That's how I reflect. I take each story and do that. But it's also in the music that we can find our answers to questions that are holding us back.
right. And one of the pieces of interesting research in your book, or you do a number of pieces of research in your book about this, is the brain. And sometimes we can't just figure out how to hear ourselves. Sometimes we need some prompting
Mm-hmm.
to get into a headspace to be able to think a little differently. And
Right.
music is a beautiful way to get there. I think it's just marvelous what you've put together. And I'm so honored. And I'm honored to be here. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, there's Michelle R. Baker saying great conversation because it, and I love Michelle. She's been on our show too, on this show too. So,
Hi, Michelle.
um, well, we've got about 5 minutes. Is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as listening? Because one of the things that I found so powerful for you too, and I think it would be really great, is you went through your three levels of listening. But when we're a mid emerging leader and we have to go in and present something, and we are at this point that I believe you said we have to go in and defend ourselves. We go in, what was that?
Advocate.
Advocate for ourselves. But when we go in, especially as emerging leaders, we're too frightened. So we want to defend our points. We want to argue for what we stand for. And we don't really get to open up and let the conversation flow.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit more about that.
I would say the most powerful thing you have, what I do with all my clients in that situation is I give them an influence map exercise and I let them understand the audience for a bit. Just think about the people and think. One of my best senior leaders I worked with is very successful career, and she's a chief operating officer now. She always says, people are people. Mm-hmm. And that's that. So if you just really think about their context and think about their questions they're having, and think about the questions you want to ask them. And it's okay if you're a little nervous. Those kinds of venues take practice. Mm-hmm. But don't look at it as, life or death to your, what I call performance self. You're always worthy, always loved, always learning. That's your peace self. So, just take it as a piece of craft in terms of whatever happens in this meeting. I am going to learn more about all these people in this meeting. Mm-hmm. Yes, clarify your message. What is my core kernel message? And believe in it, but also stay open, and stay open by prepping your questions. And if you don't have a lot of experience with those kinds of situations, I say don't wing it.
I think that's great.
Do some prep.
Yeah, great tip, because you never want to wing it.
Right.
Trust me, you don't.
And sometimes people do, or they focus too much on their deck and the thousands of things they want to say.
Yeah.
There's a different way to prepare.
Yeah. And I love that because asking the right question is really goes hand in hand with listening.
Yeah. And sometimes you can go to the audience, hey, I know you might have this question. Maybe this is a question in your mind, even if they're not asking it, right? You can do stuff like that because you're really wanting them to experience themselves thinking powerfully, as well as hearing your point. And that's an art. So
that is an art that you are simply amazing. I am putting Amy's LinkedIn profile back up on the screen here. I want to thank you, and of course, insightful, and brought curiosity and actually clarity and focus into that bass guitar. That is who you are. And I think we even have an interview together on the bass out on YouTube. So people can go and listen to that. But Amy, thank you very much. If you'll sit and talk, I will be right with you.
All right. It was good to see you, Miss Paula.
Good to see you. Thanks again.